We are live, and my name is David, and I'm with Sedenka and Nancy, and this is a dress rehearsal, or rehearsal of what I'm going to be presenting on Friday at my confirmation seminar.
Uh-huh.
So, the title of my presentation is Changing Technologies and Changing Ecologies, Pedagogical Technologists in Schools. And if you like what you see, well, you can contact me
Yes.
on Twitter or on my blog.
Wow.
And yeah, let's get started. What I want to do is spend the first half an hour going over my research, and then we can spend the next half hour talking. Of course, if you have questions while I'm presenting, let's just stop and talk. I want to provide background, and then define some terms, review some literature that's informing my understanding, and then discuss my research objectives, questions, and significance, my conceptual framework, and finally my methodology. So, as
Don't
regards...
worry. I just in the same time I just give you the comments so you don't have to pay attention to that.
Okay, sounds good. So, as regards the backgrounds, there are... how would I describe this? It's good that we're actually doing this so I can kind of rehearse in my mind what I want to talk about first. In our society these days, we are becoming more aware of technology because there are new technologies being introduced frequently into our society. And as they influence our society, they influence education, schools, which are institutions in our society. And as new technology influences schools, it influences what people learn and how they should learn. And a result of this growing awareness of how technology influences learning is the development of 21st century learning outcomes. And there's a significant body of literature on 21st century learning outcomes. And hello. Let's go back. And since there are changing learning outcomes, there are also changing ways of teaching, and ultimately schools are changing. So right now we're in a place where societies are changing because of technology, and schools and teaching and learning are changing because of technology. Now, I met some people at a conference last year who are part of this change, that are perhaps a response to this change in schools because of technology. And they were really special people. I'd never met people like them before. They are not teachers in a traditional sense. They didn't have a timetable. They were not technicians. Their primary responsibility is supporting the pedagogical aspect of teaching through technology. And I found this fascinating because I had never met people like this before. I had been a teacher for 9 years in many schools, and although I had been an IT coordinator, I'd always been primarily a teacher. I'd always been attached to a content area or a grade, a year group, or a class. But here at this conference, I was meeting people who were not attached to a year group or a content area or a class, who weren't technicians. They were supporting the pedagogical aspect of teaching through IT in schools. And that's how my interest in this research began. So let me actually define a few important terms. I call these people pedagogical technologists, and I have a very clear definition of what they are. A pedagogical technologist is not a teacher in a traditional sense, which means that they don't have a timetable, they're not assigned to a content area like maths, for example, they're not assigned to a year group, and they're not assigned to a class. They are not technicians. Their primary responsibility is not supporting the technical aspect of teaching with IT. Additionally, they aren't students. They aren't principals. This is a new role, and the primary responsibility is supporting the pedagogical aspect of teaching through IT. Additionally, I think I should define what a school is. In my study, schools can be separated into primary or secondary schools. They're discrete. That is, a school can be separated from another school. You can distinguish schools, and the core technology of a school is teaching and learning. Okay?
Yes.
So for my study, these are the definitions of schools and pedagogical technologists. Okay. So let me go over some of the literature I've been reviewing to help me to understand this phenomenon. Pedagogical technologists. How do I view them? Okay? I view them within a broader understanding of technology and change in school organizations. And I've read a lot of literature, first of all, on technology. And let me first define technology. Technology is predisposed practice with tools. So it's not necessarily an iPad, but it's what you do with an iPad that is in fact the technology. All right. In the same way that a pencil is not technology, what you do with a pencil is technology. I need to define also with and through technology because I use this a lot in my study. Doing something with technology means appropriating technology for a traditional practice. So you're actually taking a tool and a practice and it supports what you already do. But through technology means that you're taking the technology and transforming what you do. You're not appropriating it, but with this technology, you're doing something that you couldn't do before, a new practice. I talk a lot about information technology in my study, and information technology, or IT, is not necessarily computer-based. The difference is information. Technologies which enable you to communicate, create, disseminate, store, and manage information can be called information technologies. Okay? So I've also been... Okay. Oh, thank you. I've also been reading a lot about change. And what is change? Okay, so I need to define these terms so that we don't get confused in my study. Change is moving from what is known to what is unknown. Okay? And generally, it's marked by ambivalence and uncertainty. Okay? And the kind of change that I'm really focusing on in my study is technological change. And if you look at this picture here, the way I envision it is moving from one technology to another technology. And it's, again, marked by uncertainty and ambivalence. So going from one way of doing things to another way of doing things is technological change. Okay? Now, in the literature, generally, change that is positive, that is viewed as beneficial, is usually called an innovation. Alright, so change is non-neutral. It can be viewed positively or negatively, and generally change that is viewed positively in literature is called innovation. Alright? The literature also enumerates several characteristics or qualities of change that determine whether or not a change is successful or long-lasting or sustainable. And these include their advantages and disadvantages, communicability, complexity, comprehensibility, and the temporal nature of change. So these factors affect whether or not a change is sustainable. Okay? All right. So, how do I view change? I'm seeing change in schools, in organizations. And so I read a lot about organizational learning, how organizations respond to change, in particular schools.
Yes.
Okay? And when I read about organizational learning, I learned that organizations, first of all, are more complex than an aggregate of individuals. Right? So even if you just put a bunch of people together, that's not necessarily an organization. In the same way, the scaling of learning, just because an individual learns doesn't mean an organization learns. It's the scaling of learning is complex. How do you go from individual learning to an entire body of people's learning? It's a complex process. How people do it, the learning can either be internal or external. An organization can copy or modify. It can study people and artifacts to learn. The literature also describes degrees of learning, the depth and sustainability of learning. A lot of learning in organizations, how they respond to change, is in fact superficial and not sustainable. Generally, for an organization's learning to be sustainable and deep, it has to challenge people's and the organization's beliefs, values, and assumptions. Okay. And as regards school, there are different factors that affect organizational learning and the depth and sustainability of that learning. And these include community, external environment, human relationships, leadership, mental models, etc. You can read that there. Okay? So now I was reading about a specific type of organizational learning in schools, of which my pedagogical technologist is a part, an important part. And that's IT integration in schools. Integrating information technology into a school is a significant kind of change to an organization. And I define IT integration as infusing information technology into the infrastructure, curriculum, and professional organizational development. And when I was reading about IT integration in schools, I came across many categorical frameworks that explain the stages that schools go through in integrating IT. And some of them include Nancy Law's frameworks. Nancy Law is very famous or very prominent in developing these frameworks. So, what can we learn from these frameworks about IT integration in schools? Well, in the initial stages, for example, these pink stages here, the integration is generally stable and static. It's infrastructure is generally being changed and not much else. So you're getting new tools. Eventually, if we look at the yellow part, then there's a transition from appropriation to innovation. So there comes a point where people are teaching with technology and then they transition to teaching through technology. So instead of appropriating technology to reinforce existing practice, they actually start innovating their practices. And so we can see in the green parts that eventually, as the IT integration becomes more prominent, people's technological, pedagogical beliefs, values, and assumptions are changing, and that's where you get deeper organizational learning. A more sustainable change to the school. An important thing to point out is that these stages are non-linear in the long run, and they have no moral sense. They're not necessarily good or bad, a stage. Right? It just depends on what the